be a good employer. Have a regular program for reviews, a regular program for pay increases, a regular program to talk about benefits, to talk about flexible hours. All of these things have come up time and time again in this research and it just seems that there are some aspects of the golf industry, there's a disconnect, and they don't quite understand that these people deserve the same opportunities and the same kind of benefits that those club members, those board members would expect at their jobs. Why should they be any different just because they're turning a wrench at a golf course?
Welcome to Leadership on the Links, the podcast that showcases innovators in golf course management and the issues they face. I'm your host, Tyler Bloom. In Leadership on the Links, you hear the stories of people shaping the industry from their first swing to their dream match. You feel like you're on the course playing with your most inspiring colleagues, having great conversations, digging into insights and sharing a few laughs. Our industry is changing. As a leader, you need to keep up on everything from trends to technology to best practices. Together, we'll continue to build world-class clubs and teams. Let's get to it. Enjoy.
Well, super excited today to be joined by two friends that I've known for a good amount of time. Pat Jones, which is back on the podcast, I believe, for maybe the third or fourth time.
No, this is two. This is only the second time.
All right. Repeat customer. We got you back. And friend of the industry, Mike Rollins, down at SIP. Mike and I spent time. Oh, man, that must have been almost a year ago. I got actually a front-facing tour of the SIP offices. Yeah. And was totally blown away. And Mike's somebody who I connect with a lot about equipment managers, trends in the industry, what he's hearing out in the field. And most people know Mike by his, beautiful face, but also his presentation. Cutline is king. Mike, thanks for jumping on today.
Thanks for having me, dude. I told Pat earlier, I feel a little imposter syndrome. There are much more qualified people to be here today than myself, like a John Patterson or somebody like that. But yeah, as somebody, Pat brought it up over the weekend, and again this morning, as somebody in the field every single day for 5 years, I was out there almost every single day, every week on the road, and like to think I do have a good finger on the pulse of what these guys are going through. So hopefully I can represent them well today and share some feedback on what I'm seeing in the field.
One of the things that I've enjoyed about with Mike is he incorporated me into a group messaging board, and it's really a tool resource for superintendents, equipment managers. We won't talk about it too much, but I've always just enjoyed, even though I'm not actively participating in conversation, I review it every day and to kind of see what people are talking about, being educated about different practices equipment managers are doing. So a shout out to you, man, for really kind of spotlighting this position, because you've developed a really cool community of people that really respect the equipment manager position. So that leads us into today's topic. Pat and I commenced our third study on employment trends, and this time we specialized on and focused on equipment managers, and it was very revealing, some of which is not going to be a surprise to many people when they see some of the data, but I think it'd also be a tool for many superintendents to use at their clubs as they're trying to educate some of the surprises, some of the concerns, and the good as well. Let's not forget, this isn't all bad, but a lot of the great things about equipment managers and what they're doing and how important and vital that role is moving forward. So Pat, I'll kind of let you take it away on some opening statements or comments.
Well, thanks, Tyler. This is our third time around now on looking at employment trends. First one was superintendents. Second one was assistants. And this time we're looking at the folks who make the world run, golf course mechanics and equipment managers. So we were able to get about 110 responses this time around. I think they're busy people. But we certainly had enough to make some conclusions and kind of see where things are going. So we'll go through that in a little bit and kind of outline things. But right from the top, the one thing I want to impress upon people watching this is there's some urgency here. This is not something that we can kind of see how it evolves or whatever. The majority of these folks have been in the industry a long time. That means they're old like me in some cases. So you got an aging population of high-level professional equipment managers. You've got a very committed group. They love what they do, but at the same time, they can only put up with so much. So, some basic things. A top of mind thing that we encountered with both the previous studies was something as simple as I want an annual review and an opportunity to get a pay increase every year. And I think that sometimes that gets lost in the shuffle of being a busy golf course superintendent or a busy club manager or whatever else, and setting that up. That came up in every single study we've done of, I want some kind of an understanding about when I'm going to be eligible to get an increase or to get some kind of feedback, or at least meet with my boss and find out what's going on. So something as simple as that rises pretty close to the top of the list. So I'm going to go ahead and share some of the findings of this. Whoop, there we go. Let me. Okay, I guess that's the closest we're going to get for now. All right, so there we go. So when you ask simply, how likely are you to stay in this business? The majority of them, almost 80%, say, I love this. I really love what I get to do, and I'm a turf equipment pro for life. But there's asterisks. There's asterisks associated with a lot of that. A few people say that's not my forever job, and there's a small percentage that seem like they've about had it. They're pretty close to either making a jump completely out of this or at the very least changing jobs. And we'll come back to that in a minute. Does that ring true, Mike?
Yeah, 100%. And I was going to talk about it a little bit later too, is they're committed, they're lifers, they're very passionate, they're very loyal. And I'm sure you're going to talk about this a little bit too, Pat, is they're going to have some numbers there that say they're actually willing to leave because of things like culture. But yeah, like it's 100% accurate in my daily travels and conversations with people. I mean, my dad's a mechanic too, right? A lot of these guys have heard me say it a million times, is they're very passionate creatures. I always say when I do Cutline and things like that. So yeah, they are highly passionate is the word I'm going back to. And the thing is how passionate will they remain?
They're passionate enough that when you ask them, they're planning to stay. They want to stay right where they are. They like the job they have right now, or at least close to 2/3 of them do. But there's always that lure of a little more money. They don't particularly want to relocate, but there's a percentage of them that would, and then a small percentage of them that might go do something completely different. But for the most part, they like what they're doing and they want to stay there. So when you ask this question, what are the factors that are so important to success? I'm going to move this box over here a little bit. The factors that are so important to success, that they, even though only a small percentage of them have a turf degree, they do think that that's important. They do think it's valuable to have that. I think at the very least, because you can speak the same language as everybody else. You understand the agronomy behind the real sharpening and the other things that you're doing every day. But the thing that jumped out here was involvement with the associations and organizations. And I think that's partially, hey, I want to learn more. B, I want to have a chance to network other people. And C, I'm kind of isolated here. I don't get a chance to get with my colleagues from other places very often. There aren't that many sort of chapter meetings or things that I can go to. So they really do value that involvement with those organizations. So one big takeaway there is fund that. Make sure that they know that they're eligible to go do that, whether it's GCSA or otherwise. Is this something you hear consistently, Mike, that they're interested in going and being with other folks like them and learning from them?
Yeah, 100%. When I do Cutline and they come up afterward and we talk and we chat about this stuff, is they're happy that they finally got a chance to get out of the shop to come see other shops, right? Number one. So yeah, they're always excited to get out. And then something I'm sure you'll talk about a little bit later too is, and I made a note here. How did I say this? Is they're not getting the education they want. It's kind of like a Wild West. I wrote it down. I was pretty proud of myself. I'll have to find it, but yeah, it's kind of like you get on the job training. There's no formal education for cutting units, no formal education for John Deere Toro does Toro U and things like that, but there's no like proper formal education anymore. There used to be way back in the day, but now they just want to go to another shop, see another shop, see how they do it, and every single time we do it, I'm constantly hearing, "Oh, that's how you do it," right? Or, "Hey, I've been doing it that way too, and that actually really works." But they don't have this like hive mind kind of thing like superintendents do, where they can all kind of join together and in the same battle, so to speak. So yeah, it's definitely something I hear a lot out in the field.
Right. And hopefully the emerging GCSAA certification program will drive some of that and make that more widely available
Exactly.
to lots of people.
Yep.
So, in terms of what attracts them, they are there to get paid. I think that it's very clear they would like to be paid equivalent to their value to the organization, and they would like that to be stable. They want to feel like they're a good fit. All those things that we all want to feel, but it really comes down to no drama. I want a good compensation program. I want a decent place to work, and I don't want drama. Obviously, this comes back to that. Looking at compensation trends, knowing where the ballpark is, talking with your colleagues around the greater Cleveland area, the greater Atlanta area, the greater Philly area, wherever you're at, and saying, okay, what's par? What's par for a good equipment manager these days? And one of the factors there, I think, is kind of interesting is I'll show it down here, is here we go. Coming back to this annual salary tied to performance and tenure. You just want to know that there's a consistent process in place for these kinds of things. Come back to that in a minute. So when they look at what's really important, yeah, problem solving skills are important, but they do really value the stuff that Mike and others do. How can I prepare these cutting units and make them so valuable? In fact, this was a question where I think you and a couple of other people say, hey, you needed to ask about cutting units, and we added a little more value to this question. So when you go around and you talk to folks and you teach these classes, how focused is it on, no, I need to know exactly what I need to do with my John Deere unit or my old Ransoms unit or whatever it is? How focused are they on the specific solutions rather than the larger stuff?
Oh, super dialed in. So I use an analogy. It's Formula One. I actually had a guy, I wish I could share my screen and show you his comments to me. Doesn't have our machinery, like don't know him. He just started. He's only been doing it for 6 months, to the point where, because I continually call cutting units Formula One cars, where they have to be highly tuned, highly specialized. Every golf course is different. Every agronomist is different. Toro, Deere, and Jake, they don't know your superintendent's agronomic practices. They don't know your environment. They don't know your weather. You know what I mean? They don't know any of these, your turf type. So you can have a general idea on geometry, but then when I go in and I get super detailed, that's what I get back all the time is, man, I wish, even the guys that have been doing it for 30 or 40 years are like, man, I wish I had this when I first started. And Pat, when I first started 6 years ago, I would go in, and these guys, they all come from other environments, right? They come from automotive, they come from military as equipment managers. They come over, they jump in, and they may get one day with the old guy you talked about, right? They might get one day with him, or maybe 1 week if they're lucky, or a couple weeks. But usually that guy's already gone. He's retired. He's been fired. He's quit. He's moved on, kind of for the reasons we're talking about in this podcast today. And then all of a sudden, the superintendent goes, "Hey, man, I need these cutting units sharp." Right? And the guy has never seen a reel or a bed knife in his life, and he knows nothing about them. He doesn't know what to do with them or how to do it even. Right? So next thing you know, it's just screaming, it's throwing sparks, and he sends it out. So that's why I'm really glad you have this in here, and this is on the screen right now. Is mastering cutting unit skills is right up there. It's right up there with just their general problem solving skills. Because yeah, at the end of the day, they need to know 2-stroke, 4-stroke, hydraulic, electrical. You guys talk about it in your summary and your rundown of the data. But at the end of the day, John Patterson says it, and this is where I stole the line from. They are cutting unit technicians #1. And PM, preventative maintenance, is right there. Chad Braun, John Patterson would both argue, and I would too, that they're 1A and 1B, right? The cutting units, depending on where you are in the country or the world, they're out there every day or every other day, having a direct impact on the canvas out there that the superintendent is providing, as Patterson would say. And then their PMs. If you're not doing your PMs and you don't have the tools and resources to do these things, I mean, these are 1 and 2 right here: problem solving skills and mastering cutting unit skills. If you can't do those 2 things and you're not provided the tools and resources to do so, you're in trouble.
One of the things that struck me that you just talked about was it came out more in the verbatims, which we have hundreds of, right? Came out more in the verbatims about the satisfaction of knowing that you've contributed to that big green thing out there, and that you've been a part of making that what it is, and feeling like you've contributed to the whole golfer experience. Do you hear that a lot?
All the time. I mean, I've told these guys, for the viewers in the audience listening to this, I told Pat and Tyler, if they haven't already, which I'm sure they have, to watch my Daily Grind series, not to keep plugging the stuff, but it's why I make it, is for this data, is because of this data. And every single one of those guys and gals, including Kayla Kipp, talked about it. Like, that's what Patterson says. The agronomist provides the canvas, and I paint that picture. The operators paint that picture, shooting lasers on that green, on the tee, on the approach, in the fairways. So yeah, every single one of them loves having that immediate impact. And Kayla talks about it in her episode. I say it to guys and gals that I'm trying to actively recruit into the industry is, look, man, you have an immediate impact on that golf course. It's not, hey, we got to hope and pray we have grass in 6 months or when we come out of winter. It's no, even if it's bad out there, the weather's bad, the agronomist might be hampered by the weather, but you're not. You can tune that Formula One car to do what you want, and then you're the savior, even in bad weather.
Kayla's a badass. Always interested in what Kayla has to say about things.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the other thing that pops up, and this was interesting because this didn't pop up as much with assistants as maybe I thought it would and Tyler thought it would when we asked this question. But sure, they want to have good compensation and they want to have good, they want to feel like they're not being underpaid and they're taking some kind of a discount to work at a golf course because they like that. But the one thing that popped up was bad boss, right? That bad culture, not feeling like that you are treated well, or maybe the other folks there aren't being treated that well. And that's quite simply one of the things that's going to make them leave, is feeling like they're not appreciated, they're not understood, poor communications, none of that stuff we talked about with regular employment checks and regular reviews and regular increases, all of that kind of stuff. So, you just can't avoid it. Tyler, was that something I know you really expected to see that, I think, with the assistants, but it didn't pop up as much there. But here it is, loud and proud here in the equipment manager study.
Yeah, I think, as you were going through a bunch of those slides, I started thinking about on the recruiting side, things that we hear from candidates of what they're looking for. And I think, what does bad boss and bad culture actually mean? Probably needs to be a little bit further discussed than that. My exposure to it is, and what I hear is that they're involved in the decision making. They're part of morning meetings. They're part of understanding what's on the game plan for the week ahead. Their thoughts are taken seriously out in morning walks when they're viewing the equipment, and they're collaborating with their director and saying, hey, here's what's happening on quality of cut. Here's some things that we could use support. I think when I think of culture, it's, hey, I need an extra hand here to get caught up. And they're not being looked down on as like they're pulling something from the golf course. It's part of, hey, now I feel like somebody's got my back, for me. I certainly think that there's opportunity for getting more exposure at the department head level, and bringing the equipment manager in to meet with the other departments, especially as I see that roles evolve to, they're not just doing golf course equipment. They're oftentimes charge of things like golf carts, or if they have swimming pool, like facilities maintenance, right? So I think that those individuals, if they're going to be asked to do that, they should be incorporated and integrated with the other department heads. So like, it's not like they're looked at as the troubleshoot person, the 911 emergency person, and they're looked at as a team member, So I think that those are small little tweaks that could go a long way for most equipment managers as it relates to developing a good culture and holding the staff accountable, especially if you've got the same person week to week is having the same issues on cart number 11 or mower 6, that like it's actually being addressed and not just let go.
Perfect. Yep. Comes up time and time again. And isn't it interesting at a time when more and more interns are being exposed to board meetings and being out there, with budget planning and things like that, we don't give the same opportunity to our equipment managers. And I think we got to change that.
One of the slides you put in there, when I think about compensation, I think this is important for everybody to hear this from the cheap seats. I'm not, in the grind necessarily every single day, but what I hear when we engage with most equipment managers on some of the searches we've had, and we've been fortunate and blessed to work with a lot of great clubs that really value this position. A lot of times what I hear from the candidates is compensation certainly moves the needle for them, but they're not leaving their jobs, I think, entirely for comp. I think it's important. And I think they would just want to know that their company and their current employer is willing to have a conversation. That doesn't mean that they're absolutely going in and saying, hey, I just saw XYZ club post for this, I need to go match that. What I think they're looking for, and I think this is no different from a superintendent, an assistant, I just want to know what's the pathway to advancement, because I really like my place of employment. Most equipment managers that I've dealt with and engaged with don't want to leave. Like they're very much stable in their current roles and they like working there, but they just get to a point where that annual performance review feels like an afterthought and it's not really addressed with seriousness. And I think that they're just looking for that kind of conversation to be had versus like, let's course correct because the market shows I should be making this. I think it's more of, I just want to know that you're willing to have a conversation.
Percent. I mean, that's just spot on. Mike, when you think about why people do make a move, because you know a lot of them, why do they typically make that jump? And we've got here listed in front of us the things that they've listed. Annual salary increases, tied to performance, being number one, again. But why else are they making that move? Because they don't want to. They tend to want to stay where they're at. So why are they making a change?
It is 100% the culture, and that's that cheesy line of culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? It's cheesy, but so true. You could have the greatest black and white on paper plan as an agronomist, as whatever your title is, superintendent, director of agronomy. But if you're not, I can't even say what Tyler just said any better. So I can't even add anything to what Tyler just said because it's spot on. It is, in my experience, it's culture. So I'm in tons of group chats, whether it's on just the regular phone, on the WhatsApp, anything like that, and all kinds of email chains and text messages where they're not leaving because of that compensation. Yeah, Tyler nailed it. It is part of it. It is 100% culture or lack thereof of culture, or not feeling like that a superintendent is there to bat for them. A good example, really good example, and I can't name anybody. I don't want to name anybody here, but one of the guys I can think of in South Florida who left his job, it was because he went to management and said, "Hey, I need another guy in the shop." They wouldn't give it to him. I get it. It's all relative, budgets and things like that. I get that. I understand that. But the superintendent was not going to go to bat for him in the board meetings, in the Greens committee, or with the ownership, or with any of them. He wasn't willing to go to bat. Then it gets to the point where the equipment manager says, "I'll take a pay cut so that you can then add another guy in the shop," and they still wouldn't go to bat for him. So he left. I could give you 40 of these examples. A good example, a happy one to keep this light and happy, is John Patterson at Atlanta Athletic Club with Lucas, his director of agronomy, Lucas. When the board comes in, Lucas jokes that when the board comes in to meet with him to go over budget or look at, the shop and things like that, they don't really want to talk to Lucas anymore. They want to go talk to John Patterson. But that's because Lucas is always in these big, huge, important meetings, fluffing up JP, right? Talking about Patterson, talking about what he's doing to make their golf course look really, really good, right? So then he's willing to go to bat. One more really good example is Skip Hines, director of agronomy down at Royal Point, Sienna. Matt, he goes in and they need a new wash bay, right? And he talks about this in episode 4 of the Daily Grind that I made, where he goes in, he requests, the $100,000 wash pad back in the early 2000s, which back then is expensive, right? And then I think it was the chairman comes down. They're walking through the shop, seeing things, everything's spotless because they take care of the equipment. They take care of the shop in the area. And the guy says to Matt, "Look, your bathroom in this shop is cleaner than my bathroom at home. Here's your $100,000." Right. Yeah. But that's because Matt was willing to go in and go to battle for these guys. So again, I can't add much more than what Tyler said. That was spot on. But yeah, it's culture when these guys are leaving. And there is a big turnover problem, Pat. I know you're going to go through some more data. I'm looking at it over here, but we'll talk about it later. But one of the things is that they're leaving and they may stay in the industry. I see massive churn and massive turnover from equipment managers, and it's for these exact reasons. And they stay in the industry. They just hop from course to course.
There was an article in the newspaper not too long ago that Ford needed to hire 5,000 new mechanics for dealerships. That's all you got to know. So this pops up too, and this is something that I think is a big trend among the top clubs in America, is they're finally understanding the value of a new maintenance facility, if for no other reason that they have female employees and they have to have accommodations for their employees, and things like that really matter, but also trying to attract and retain a new director of agronomy or whatever it might be. But they're beginning to understand this is a point of pride for their club to have a good maintenance facility. Most of the mechanics we talked to felt like their place was pretty good. Again, I think largely the people that responded to this are in the top third someplace. They're not necessarily working at a small muni out in Basehor, Kansas, or someplace like that. So for the most part, they're thinking at a higher level. But at the same time, they feel pretty good about But that's one more thing to think about. Am I creating a good workplace? Is it a good space for them? Is it safe? Do they have places to put their stuff? So, don't let that one slide for sure. And then the respect thing. And again, I think this is a higher level, but it looks great. You think, wow, 2/3 of them feel strongly respected. That means a third of them don't. That means a third of them feel like, I don't really know that they understand what I do, or I don't know that they really appreciate what I do. You're probably a shoulder to cry on for some of these guys, Mike. How often do you hear this? These guys just don't get it.
I think there's more. I would have more questions than answers. I think with this one, this is a great slide. I think it's great. I think it's awesome that 60 whatever percent feel respected. That's fantastic. But I kind of think it kind of goes back to a few moments ago of how do they feel though about their superintendent going to bat for them? How many options do they get there? How many things do they get to make decisions on, right? How many decisions are theirs? How much ownership do they feel other than just the cutting units going out there? Can they take ownership in the equipment they get to choose to use, right? Like there are a
Right.
lot more things I think among that I would like to dig down deeper into, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things was there was sort of a split in the respondents between so most of them were one-man operations or one-person operations, and then a few had one helper, and a small percentage had two, three, four people working for them. And mostly it's a solo operation. But one of the things that popped out was solo operation, where they're in charge of everything and they manage it, and they're in charge of purchasing and all that kind of stuff, versus I'm just in charge of fixing the stuff that somebody else
Right.
bought. So we
Right.
we saw that too. So again, as we go through this, we're only touching I think the most important points. I strongly encourage anybody who's interested in this to reach out, and pretty soon we'll have the final kind of report all ready to go. To go ahead and register for that now via Tyler's website, and then you can get the information as it comes. So with that, we sort of covered the some of the key data points, although I think there's a few more that Mike wanted to bring up. But I think the main things we learned are: be a good employer. Okay, have a regular program for reviews, a regular program for pay increases, a regular program to talk about benefits, to talk about flexible hours. All of these things have come up time and time again in this research that we've done. And it just seems that there are some aspects of the golf industry, leadership within clubs, where there's a disconnect, and they don't quite understand that these people deserve the same opportunities and the same kind of benefits that those club members, those board members, would expect at their jobs. Why should they be any different just because they're turning a wrench at a golf course? So, Tyler, what were your big takeaways from this? Because I know you've done, obviously the 3 studies we've done together, but you've talked to lots and lots of clubs about this. What were your big takeaways that you saw from this data?
It was probably reaffirming kind of a thought of what we're seeing on the recruiting side, is that the role has changed and the expectations for that role have changed, ranging from bench or, compensation to what the skills are of those individuals. And there is a significant gap between, and you saw that here with those that were 20 plus years as an equipment manager versus somebody that's maybe been in it for 10 years or less. There is a wide ranging gap. And so it's hard to characterize to people what the standard should be for an equipment manager, because every facility is going to be slightly different, whether it's the comp they're offering, the facility that they're at, their own personal experience working with a tenured equipment manager versus like now what it's going to look like with somebody less experienced. It's hard to communicate that with people and for them to really wrap their heads around, like, this isn't like something that's like 10 years down the road. This is an issue now. And
Yeah.
we see it in the search side that there's one way to change that narrative for yourself, and that's pay. You're going to have to buy out basically getting somebody with experience, because there's just not that depth of and that volume of people that are getting into it. It's not, and even on the turf side, it's not much different than the assistant superintendent pipeline short, but this is, to me, way more of a concern. And I think that it's good to see there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of industry people, whether it's a GCSA, whether it's at the local chapters, it's Mike Rollins, people like that are really trying to reorient the pathway for somebody to become an equipment manager, there's no cookie cutter answer here of how to solve that. Each facility is just going to have to take ownership. It's really kind of my philosophy on it.
Mike, what's the number one thing facilities ought to do to begin to reconcile this and begin to uh, recognize the value of these people in the organization?
Well, I think the agronomists are going to hate this answer, but and regardless of their title, whether it's superintendent, director of agronomy, or whatever it may be, but um, in my personal experience in the past 6 years, I was just going to be brutally honest. In my past 6 years, the biggest thing here is that the equipment manager, and I've said this to very important people at the GCSAA, I've said this to very important people just in the golf course industry in general, is that without somebody running this equipment, maintaining this equipment, and that's a lot. I know a lot of superintendents that maintain this equipment too. They're a superintendent and the mechanic at the same time. But without somebody maintaining this equipment, this golf course may not exist. And then this industry does not exist without somebody maintaining this equipment, right? So then on top of that, the workforce is aging, right? Tyler just touched on it. This was a problem 10 years ago. It was a major problem when I started 6 years ago, and something I've been trying to work on. That's why I made the daily grind. And Cutline is King is for getting the exposure out there of what equipment managers are doing, why they're doing it, how valuable they are, how exciting it can be. That was a big emphasis of Kayla's episode in episode 3. And you guys have it here. 59% of them have 20 years of experience or more. Only 5% of them have entered the field in the last 5 years. There is no pipeline, right? Tyler nailed it. This is a 10-year ago problem, 5-year ago problem, in my opinion. And so I think to answer your question 10 minutes later, Pat, is that there is exciting stuff here, right? 64% of them would stay in golf over better pay outside of the industry. I think that's a positive silver lining here, right? However, I think to answer your question 10 minutes later, superintendents need to be willing to give these guys and gals the education they need as a mechanic, because to one of Tyler's points, we're not just turning wrenches on carburetors anymore, right? They are turning wrenches on all kinds of stuff. Which again, I did this earlier: hydraulics, electrical, 2-stroke, 4-stroke, add robotics in, add GPS in, right? John Patterson at Atlanta Athletic Club has, I wrote it down, where is it? He has, for 45 holes, he has 4 guys in the shop, right? Could easily have 5 if he really fought for it hard enough. One of those guys does just robotics and preventative maintenance. They have so many Husqvarna robots running around. They have one person focusing on that. So if you're a superintendent and you're focused on robotics and you want to do all this stuff, and you want to get into GPS, maintain all of that stuff, he's educated.
So I think you're cutting out a little bit, but I think this robotics thing is, we didn't ask a question about it, and we should have, because it did turn up a lot in the comments about where are we going to find the people to do this?
Did you guys lose me?
We're back.
Can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah, but we were talking about the robotics and about the change that represents. And there's been, I think, some stuff in the marketplace about, oh, well, the companies to maintain all of that stuff for you. No, they do not. So there's a whole new training system that needs to be developed to bring that stuff out to people.
Yeah.
But and John is always fortunate to have one person focused on that with that great program there. So when people do leave, how long should they expect that position to be open? If somebody gives notice tomorrow, how long is it going to take them, Tyler, to find a replacement?
I'm laughing because I think our original study, we asked that question to superintendents.
We did.
And it was like 3 to 4 months. I think that's fairly accurate. I mean, a typical process for us is usually 60 days, and then given that they may give another 20, 30 days notice to their employer, so I think that timeline is fair, but I think that all depends again at the facility level and what's the expectation for that role. There seems to be a certain level of club where they may be more open-minded to somebody coming directly from automotive or another mechanical kind of background, that they're going to be more open-minded to taking somebody on like that than, let's say, a place that's going to host a major event, a major renovation. There's probably a little bit less tolerance for, lack of industry experience. But yeah, I think 3 months 2 to 3 months is probably pretty standard, and in some cases, depending on how desperate, it sounds sad saying how desperate you are, but how desperate you are and the time of the season, I think you're going to explore different types of programs or different types of candidates. One thing I will say to that, though, that's why it's really important to have the relationships with your local distribution, because oftentimes the distribution knows who is available, who's interested. They may also offer mobile tech services. I dealt with that as a superintendent personally, and leveraging those kind of
Yep.
resources by function. I had no other choice. And then we developed staff from that. So it's interesting as I think about, as you just were saying, that one of the best recommendations that I think we've given to employers as it relates to filling, let's call it assistant equipment technician roles. I think you ask the current head EM, who on the staff do you enjoy working with? And
Yeah.
Mhm.
bring that person in after morning assignments or afternoon assignments that they can come and help with basic things like oil changes, filling tires, checking just basic preventative maintenance things so that the equipment manager actually can impart their knowledge. That's one thing we also found in this study is they're really passionate about what they do. And they want to impart that knowledge and experience with somebody who shows some genuine interest. And I think the best way to formulate that is by asking the equipment manager, who on the team can you relate to, or do you feel comfortable with that you might be able to leverage them to offset, some of the things that you can't get to just because you don't have time.
That's a great suggestion. That fits in so many ways culturally and everything else. Have you seen that be successful a few places, Mike?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I could rattle off 10 of them that have been really successful in pulling somebody in off of the crew because somebody was hanging out after lunch. He eats his lunch and he comes into the shop. He's like, "What are you doing there, man? Like, what are you doing with the cutting?" And like, that's the guy where most of these equipment managers, they know, all right, this guy's going to end up in this shop in the next 6 months. And so
Yeah.
I think Tyler, Terry Apple really well over at Overbook. What Terry's doing is he will, I think, I'm going to get this wrong. So sorry ahead of time, Terry, but I think it's every week or every other week or maybe once a month or something. A certain amount of people come in off the crew and they spend dedicated amounts of time in the shop just to see what Terry's doing, why he's doing it, how vital it is, how important it is. So one, they gain a respect for what the equipment manager is doing. And then two, at the same time, Terry's like, "Hey, who's into this stuff?" You know what I mean?
Yeah.
John Patterson's done the same thing. There are some other people out there doing apprenticeship programs. They're starting to talk about where they can transfer guys. So maybe an assistant in the shop, he's already an assistant. He's a mechanic. He's working in the shop. They'll send him from Terry's place in Overbrook down to South Florida for 3 months or for 3 weeks or whatever it may be. And then they're gaining all of this kind of knowledge from different people. I think that's a really good idea. But yeah, I think as far as instead of me sitting here talking about doom and gloom and there's no pipeline because there isn't a pipeline, I think there to have some solutions and some answers to the problem would be, yeah, an apprenticeship program, what Tyler talked about, working through distributors and dealers and things like that. And I think honestly, just superintendents kind of just listening, number one, to their equipment manager and saying, I say this in Cutline in the beginning that superintendents can't attend this class and then go back to their shop and start throwing stones from a glass house at the equipment manager saying, "Hey, you're doing cutting units wrong because Mike Rollins says so." Because then they hate Mike Rollins when I designed it to help them, right? To help the equipment manager. I tell the superintendents, and I spend 5 slides going after the superintendents saying, you guys need to, hopefully you're sitting in this class and you're asking yourself, have I given my equipment manager the tools and the resources to one, be successful, two, to do what I want them or I'm asking them to do in the shop? And if I haven't given them what they need in order to do that, I can't be mad.
Right.
And so I think that's a big deal here too, is if they can provide not just a better shop or a brand new shop, Pat, but if they can add some more resources in there, if they can give them some better tools, and if they change their systems and cultures a little bit to just involve the equipment manager, I think that kind of puts them a step ahead just a little bit.
Yeah. Back in the day, we had Lake City Community College, and Lake City Community
Exactly.
College was just this great opportunity for people to become superintendents, but also mechanics. And I think they
Yep.
produced as many or more mechanics. They were, in some cases, because it was a Florida-based program. In some cases, there were people from the Navy. They'd had some equipment work in the Navy, and so they would go get this degree. Is there a Lake City Community College out there these days that's doing this that we don't really know about, or Georgetown or somebody else? Is this something they touch on in the GAP program at Pinehurst? So is anybody doing this?
From my experience, my knowledge, no. There are obviously all of your turf programs, or they'll do like, and I'll do it. Ohio State uses our machines along with Foley and Bernhard, and so I'll go up there and I'll do a little bit of stuff with them. And in there, you hear the kids are like, "Yeah, this is awesome, this is fun," but it's only like 6 weeks or 8 weeks of their entire agronomy program, right? So they're just getting a little taste of it just to see what the shop is like, but there's no more again, I could be wrong. In my knowledge, there's no more dedicated equipment manager track. I talk about it a little bit in episode 2. There's one out in Arkansas doing a little bit, small engines, but there's nothing dedicated to just equipment managers. So that's a big reason of why I was starting to say before I broke up earlier. Superintendents, I don't want them to be afraid to send their equipment manager just around the corner for half a morning, right, or for half a day. And I say this to superintendents too, because they'll argue with me. I can't let him leave the shop or else all hell breaks loose. Well, dude, if your equipment manager leaves the shop and all hell is going to break loose, we have bigger problems that need to be addressed. He should be able to go, or she should be able to go somewhere to see how they're doing it somewhere else, to get that education they're looking for, to go to the national show. The national show numbers that the GCSAA could tell you from equipment manager attendance has been awesome. And they're learning so much. And now they're doing presentations and things like that. I think it's incredibly valuable because they come in, they've never seen a reel on a bed knife before in their life. They might be good with small engines, but they can't split a tractor in half, right? So, or they can split a tractor in half, but they're bad with small engines and they know nothing about cutting units. So then they get overwhelmed, and now, okay, this could be why we only have a 5% entry in the past 5 years. So how do we address that? And again, that's with the daily grind, trying to make it attractive to show people, hey, like, this is a fun position. You're outside, you have a massive immediate impact every single day. How do we attract and recruit these kids? I like to think I'm helping a little bit, but I don't really know the answer yet.
Okay. Well, I mean, there needs. I love this idea of giving them a taste or whatever else, but maybe there's some sort of a form you can fill out that indicates whether or not you have a skill set that might lend itself to being a mechanic or whatever. I think we got to try everything because this is a really serious issue. And again, how do we communicate this to clubs, Tyler? How do we communicate it to the folks who are ultimately signing off on budgets and making the decisions? How do we convince them that this is an important position that in some cases deserves a pay grade close to a superintendent?
Well, Mike, this is a really good one because I think there's a couple of variables here. Like, let me take a step back on the education platform. I think that I have heard whispers of some of our industry groups putting together more of a formalized program. I do know that the SUNY state schools, and I can't remember which one, actually has a auto mechanics for agriculture program that is more like a 2-year sort of a trade type fast track program, but it's something. And I think why that hasn't really registered at the agronomy level, like why that's not being more educated on. I think if it's not like an immediate problem that somebody's got somebody that's leaving the job, it's not a problem. But it's, for whatever reason that doesn't translate comparative to, oh, I need to have an intern for the agronomy side. I don't, just because there's less of a pathway beyond that role. And I don't see that because of the amount of facilities that need good equipment managers that are willing to pay, let's say 70, 80 grand as like a very base number. And I think it really comes back to the superintendent when they're evaluating their overall programs, whether that's fungicides, whether that's fertilizer, whether that's general continued education, like they've got to look at how much of all that is predicated on having high quality functioning equipment.
Yep.
So I think that in of itself, like, needs to be at the superintendent needs to take ownership of understanding the value of that before they can go educate a club on what the value of that is. Most clubs that I would work with would probably say, hey, it's a superintendent's job to define their budget and to define somewhat of the expectations. So if the superintendent's not really an advocate for it, it kind of falls on deaf ears.
Yeah,
nailed it.
Yeah, I agree. The club's got to buy into it. So Mike, we'll have a few minutes left here, and lose Tyler. But when you look this stuff over, when I sent it to you, what were the 2 or 3 really biggest things that jumped into your mind about what this data suggests about the current state and future of equipment management?
I mean, I wrote it down. It was my initial takeaways. Let's see. Here we go. The EM position is a high passion position. You guys talked about that. There's a compensation gap, right? Everyone knows they're underpaid. They stay because they love it for now. There's an aging workforce. There's no pipeline. There's no new entrants, no formal training system. And this is what I wrote down. I was proud of myself for this. knowledge is informal and tribal. There is a lot of stuff that, I mean, I've got customer just sent me old SIP manuals from the 1930s. Oh, we can't see it because of the green screen. There we go. But there was really good education in there. Deer, they all have really good stuff, but there's 10 different companies saying 10 different terms and terminology, right? And so you have all of these different approaches and schools of thought. So that's why I wrote the word tribal down, right? Then the leadership gap, or what to be nice, right? Leadership quality is highly variable. We talked about this before we started recording, Pat. These are my biggest takeaways, my biggest concerns with this. The data, the data is great, but my concerns from reading it. And yeah, we're not talking about equipment manager leadership. We're talking about agronomists, and the culture and supervisor quality, our retention infrastructure. That's what's gonna get these guys and gals there. That's what's gonna keep them there. And Tyler, you nailed it, dude. Absolutely nailed it. In that, if they're not going in and saying, hey, yeah, we're going to do an $8 million package, or we're going to do a $4 million package, but they're not thinking about what it's going to take to maintain all of this. And okay, holy cow, we got money, we can go from $4 million to a $6 million lease package. They got to stop and think, do I need to add somebody else into the shop, or we're going to add all these robotics and GPS? I need to add somebody else in the shop to help this person out. So, yeah, I think it's, as a superintendent or as the agronomist in general, trying to educate yourself, and maybe there needs to be something to help show these guys how valuable the EM position is and why you should fight for it.
I think that's exactly the right note to end on. And the way I would characterize it is, the house is on fire. When you think about all the things that could present issues to the amazing growth of golf right now. I mean, there's never been a better golf economy in the history of golf than right now. And you think about, well, what could keep us from continuing that and continuing to do great things with these courses we have? Assistants, mechanics, spray techs, which we haven't even talked about. That ability to make sure that you've got people out there who know what they're doing and are properly licensed and trained when handling plant protection products. Those are really the things that come up that might be a real problem, that in water someday. But those are the things that strike me as the most pressing issues we have. And it all comes back to people. So, Tyler, you get the final word. It's your podcast.
Yeah, I appreciate Mikey coming on here. There's a whole nother discussion around how do we actually establish what that standard is for compensation, and how do we evaluate that can be utilized as a tool, because I think that largely the compensation gap exists because we just have done what everything's been done the way it's been done before. And those goals were set from something predicated that I don't know aligns with the influx of money coming into clubs. And you could make that argument for superintendent. You could make that argument for assistant, although I think the assistant superintendent has elevated in comp. I think that those are things that need to be a little bit more thought out. And maybe that's part of, Bloom Golf Partners evolution as it relates to this.
And can I add one more thing too? I know we got just another minute. Can I add one more thing?
Sure.
So I think too, I don't want to be all negative, right? I want to end on like a happy note from my side personally. I feel like I've been super negative, but I've just been thinking about this for 6 years. I said it earlier, 64% of these equipment managers would stay in golf over better pay outside of golf. So we already have a really good base. So I think the superintendents being able to fight for EMs and realizing they should fight for them, I think it goes a long way, because it is all relative. They don't all have money. They might be a public muni, like you said, Pat, in the middle of nowhere with 9 holes and no money. But even then, that culture will still help them recruit keep the ones that are already here and happy and want to stay here and are passionate, and it'll help them recruit the new ones that can enter the workforce too.
True. But as my friend John Riley, who always accuses me of being sort of Nancy negative, says, the flip side of that is that everybody just takes it for granted that they're going to stay because they're real loyal employees. And that's not a good assumption. That's not a good assumption.
Agreed.
So, Tyler, thank you very much for having me on again. I enjoyed it very much. Thank you for joining us. It's kind of short notice, but there's nobody I would have rather had than you in this chair. So thank you very much. Tyler, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I appreciate kind of ending this on a positive note, because all that being said, I don't know if I've ever seen focus on equipment managers as there is. And I think positive thing, that momentum that we need to keep.
I agree.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Leadership on the Links. For more leadership insights and industry expertise, connect with us at bloomgolfpartners.com or follow us on social media sites LinkedIn and Instagram. If you enjoyed this episode of Leadership on the Links, we'd be thrilled if you'd leave a review or share it with someone who you know would get some value. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to stay updated. Thanks for joining us today.